Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our legislative halftime briefing. We're so glad to have you with us. And as you can tell, we are recording this webinar, and we'll be sure to share the recording and our presentation slides as soon as we can after the webinar concludes. And so that you know who's chatting with you tonight, we are your Citizens Action Coalition. We are a nonprofit consumer and environmental advocacy organization that was founded here in Indiana back in 1974 in response to the energy crisis. And since that time, we've helped save Hoosiers at least $10 billion in excess utility charges. So it's an uphill battle, but we don't give up. We work for a few main goals here in Indiana: affordable utility bills, a cleaner environment, and a stronger democracy across the state. And we work towards those goals really in three main ways. One is by conducting research and educating and organizing the public, because we are stronger when we stand together, especially when you're taking on big companies. We also engage at the Indiana State House. It's why everybody's here tonight. But we like to make sure that legislators are hearing the perspective of the people and consumers, and not just from utilities and other large industries. Lastly, we do also engage in regulatory advocacy and litigation. So when utility companies file to raise your bills, we engage at the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission to stand up for you. And we've got a full agenda tonight. I'm joined by some amazing CACers, our Executive Director, Kerwin, and Program Organizer, Lindsay, who are really on the ground at the State House. And we also have Ben Inskeep, our Program Director, who has also testified and helps out legislatively, but does amazing work for us in the cases we engage in front of the Commission. And with that, I will pass it to Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. I'm hopeful that you're able to gain what you're looking for in this webinar, which is a deep dive on all of the bills that we consider important for consumers this year. So a little process story. Session has begun, as you might notice. It is full underway. In fact, we've reached almost the halfway point in the legislative session this year, with the Senate concluding its first half of business today, and the House will conclude its first half on Monday. So the session started a little early this year in December with the redistricting issue. That was House Bill 1032, and that is all done with. That bill, as a reminder quickly, did not move forward. It did fail. And we are now in the behest of just a slew of legislation at the State House. And we will run through things that died and are still alive and that you should be worried about. So the Senate bills that did not pass out of the Senate today, like I mentioned, are dead. They will be considered dead for the rest of the session, but that does not mean the issue is dead. Any issue can come back, and there are a myriad of ways that happens, but we'll focus on the timeline in this section alone. So anytime you see acronyms in this briefing tonight, SB means Senate bill, HB means House bill. And you'll see a lot of those acronyms on our website too. So we use all of the same terminology throughout this webinar that you'll see on our website. So it will be very congruent for you. The State General Assembly consists, of two chambers: the House, which is 100 members, and the Senate, which is 50. So you've got 150 decision makers, 151, including the governor, on most all of these decisions. And we're going to discuss each bill tonight, which, as this terminology, a little key here tells you, is a proposed piece of law that is not yet law, but it's proposed, meaning a bill or legislation, which means it's not enacted yet. It is not law yet, but it could very well be after the legislative session ends and after the governor signs it. So we will continue with our conversation now regarding mostly committee work and some floor work as we've reached this halfway point. But whenever you hear us refer to a committee, that is a smaller group of legislators discussing subject matter they are experts in, or should be experts in. And then the question goes to the whole floor. And then the obvious question is, are they going to pass it? And that's where you have that conversation on the floor before all legislators in each chamber. So it has to pass both before it goes to the governor, and that is where I will leave it. As I mentioned, the House is yet to finalize its calendar for Monday, which will be third readings, and that will be their final day in the first half of the legislative session, and then we'll go to the second half. So I'm going to throw it back to Kerwin to discuss to our key legislation, including House Bill 1002. But we've got some good stuff for you right before 1002. Take it away.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So happy you have joined us this evening. And it's hard to believe we are halfway through this legislative session already. It's moving pretty fast. These are the primary bills that CAC is working on and following, and the ones that we'll be discussing tonight. We have five that we are currently supporting those bills in their current form, and four that we are opposing in its current form. I think that's important to note because a couple of these we have changed our positions based on amendments that were adopted either in committee or on the floor. But at the moment, that is our position of the bill in its current form, if you will. Just a quick mention, not going to spend much time here, but, as always, we like to start out with, the laundry list, if you will, of good legislation that was introduced, that unfortunately did not get heard. We were very, very excited and thrilled that we had Senate Bill 196, community energy bill from a Republican this session. Senator Greg Walker down in Columbus did not get a hearing. Some great bills on the new contemporary issue that is plug-in solar. That bill's been championed by our friends at the Solar United Neighbors and Indiana Conservation Voters and others leading the charge on those bills. But unfortunately, those did not get heard. Had some good bills addressing community concerns around carbon capture and storage, or CCS, that failed to get a hearing. Many bills introduced on data centers, most of them good, dealing with water issues, prices issues, transparency issues, and others that unfortunately did not get heard. And we just have a bullet there in the bottom. There were some great legislations introduced by the folks like Senator Jackson, Senator Hunley, and others dealing with positive things to protect consumers, especially low-income customers, bills that have been introduced before in the past, but unfortunately, and once again failed to get a hearing before the respective committees that they were assigned to. I'm going to talk quickly about these four bills that we currently support in their current form before we get to the big one, obviously, House Bill 1002. But we do have some bills that we have supported. Senate Bill 240, authored by Utility Chair in the Senate, Senator Cook, Surplus Interconnection Service. This is a do no harm bill, but maybe do some good kind of a bill. It deals with addressing interconnection problems on our grid, where it's taking a really, really long time for projects to get interconnected to the grid, sometimes up to 7 or 8 years. This is would require that the utilities that file integrated resource plans before the commission, the big utilities, if you will, evaluate the opportunities to use surplus capacity on their interconnection grid, basically at the point of interconnection at their power plants, where they might have 200, 300, 400 megawatts of available capacity that could be used to interconnect a new generation source, hopefully renewable, to the system, and speed up that process rather than being a 5 to 7 to 8 year sort of interconnection process. It could be done in 1 to 2 years, far more efficient, get the new power plants online. We had concerns with the introduced version of Senate Bill 240, but before we even testified, there was a committee amendment adopted, offered by Senator Cook, that was adopted, that addressed our concerns. And now this is just requires that utilities, take a look and evaluate the possibility for using that for new capacity, excess capacity, if you will. Hopefully we'll, save some time in interconnection and save ratepayers some money in the long run. So not a bad idea to, require that utilities take a look at that in the future. We also have Senate Bill 241 called Utility Service Enhancement Improvement Cost, a fairly innocuous bill and a bill that, addresses water and wastewater utilities uh, increased costs, if you will, in two very specific areas. Number one, increased costs in the cost of power or energy, electricity. How funny is that? Yes, water and wastewater utilities are struggling with increased electric rates, as we all are, but also increased costs for chemicals that they use at their water treatment plants to treat water. Those have also been going up in recent years. Inflationary pressures as we see with most products. So what this bill does is it allows those water and wastewater utilities to file to recover those costs for just those specific areas if they have increased by more than 3%. However, what was added to the bill, which is one of the reasons for our support, it also requires that they file if those costs decrease by more than 3%, meaning we would see a reduction in utility bills. And one of the reasons for our support for this bill is this keeps those water utilities out of rate cases where rates do go up, and just a way for them to address costs that fall outside of their control. And we had good conversations with the water wastewater utilities. So at the moment, we're offering our support to that bill. We also have Senate Bill 7, which just recently passed the full Senate on a vote of 36-12. This bill addresses carbon sequestration and storage facilities. And what this bill does is it basically says, if you're going to transport supercritical CO2 or CO2 captured from an industrial facility in a different county, and you're going to transfer that waste product, let's be clear, supercritical CO2 captured at industrial site is industrial waste or garbage. And if you want to take that garbage from one county and dump it into another county, then you have to get the approval of the appropriate legislative body in that county before you can transport and dump your garbage in another county. Unfortunately, the Wabash Valley Resources Project in West Terre Haute is exempted from that bill. And should anybody else receive a Class 6 permit before July 1st, they will also be exempted from that bill, as an amendment was added on second reading from Senator Baldwin that basically exempts any project that has a Class 6 permit as of July 1st, 2026. I'll go back one slide there, Kelly. So that's Senate Bill 7, which now will move to the House and is sponsored by Representative Matt Commons. And then a fairly innocuous bill, but a good bill, Senate Bill 6, extension of water service. This basically speaks to condemnation of property, if you will, by water wastewater utilities looking to put in new water mains, water lines, or whatever the case may be, and are needing to, acquire easements or put that on private property. Lots of controversy around that issue lately, with lots of water work going on, especially with the LEAP project up in Lebanon, and challenges with some property owners here. But what this bill does, it requires the water utilities to provide notice if they need a parcel of land to extend water service. So they must notify you in advance. They must let you know that they do have the ability to condemn your property. And the bill requires that if those property owners, affected property owners, or affected local officials want a meeting with the water utility about those projects, that the water utility shall have a meeting within 30 days of the request of those property owners. So it's a good bill brought by Senator Niemeyer that is wanting to address sort of making sure that folks have a heads up about water projects and condemnation of property that may be coming their way because of the need to extend water service. So good bill, passed unanimously out of committee, passed unanimously out of the Senate, and now it's in the House. Now, the big bill, and the one that is really taking up a lot of our focus, and that is the quote-unquote affordability bill, if you will, House Bill 1002, priority bill for the House Republican caucus, authored by Representative Schankweiler, Republican from Noblesville, with multiple co-authors, as you can see on there as well. Just a quick history of the bill, December 4th, 2025. Remember, as Lindsay mentioned, session started early because of that great redistricting conversation we had at the State House. So Chairman Solly took advantage of the early start to the session, had an informational hearing on December 4th. That is archived. All these hearings are archived. You can watch them on the archived video sites on the legislative website. But an informational hearing on December 4th, not necessarily about the bill, but about some of the concepts in the bill, most notably performance-based rate making. The bill was heard for the first time on January 13th, and at that hearing, CAC was opposed to the bill, as was the Indiana Energy Association, and as was the industrial users, basically the three parties that practice before the commission, saw some flaws in the introduced version of the bill. We expressed our concerns, and we were opposed to the bill. The bill was then brought back before the committee on January 20th. 4 amendments were adopted, some from Democrats, good amendments that improved the bill, assuaged some of our concerns, not all of our concerns, but enough of our concerns that we are now in a support position on the bill. And it did leave the committee on a unanimous vote of 13-0 and passed yesterday on the House floor by a pretty large margin, a vote of 89-4. And now it moves to the Senate, where, of course, it's sponsored by the Senate Utility Chair, Senator Cook, Republican from Bedford. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I'm going to speak to the consumer and low-income provisions in the bill, then I'm going to turn it over to Ben to talk about some of the rate-making provisions and performance-based rate-making part of the bill. But these first 3 provisions are the primary reason, really, that CAC is supporting this bill. These are important legacy issues for Citizens Action Coalition, and the fact that we have some of these items included in a priority bill from the House Republican Caucus is a very encouraging and very good sign. First and foremost, and what we like most about the bill, is there's finally a mandate for the electric utilities to provide assistance programs to low-income households, defined as households that are eligible to receive the LIHEAP federal benefit. And it provides for a funding mechanism of 0.2% of residential revenues. My understanding is roughly that equates to about $1.5 million a year on average across our 5 big investor-owned electric utilities. But I can't say how important this provision is. We're one of few states that really have nothing at the state level in terms of state level programs to assist low-income customers with their electric bill, something CAC has been working on, fighting for decades. And the fact that we finally have a mandate in a bill to make this happen is a very, very good thing. We have some concerns. The programs are not defined in the bill. The bill largely leaves it up to the electric utilities to shape and define those programs, but the bill does require the commission have a rulemaking about that bill. So at least there's a rulemaking provision directing the commission to sort of set up commission rules and standards around those programs. So we're going to continue to work to improve the language in the bill around those programs, but we are in strong support of the idea of finally offering assistance to those most in need, because we're all struggling with affording our utility bills, but there are populations that are struggling mightily even more and facing tough choices on a daily basis between putting food on their table, paying their rent, and paying their utility bill, or picking up a prescription. And CAC believes we have a strong moral obligation to ensure that those folks have some dignity and can afford day-to-day life. The second piece that we really like about the bill is there's finally a summer disconnect moratorium for LIHEAP eligible households contained in the bill. We've had a winter moratorium for decades in place in Indiana, but we have not had a summer disconnection moratorium for LIHEAP, unfortunately. The moratorium was amended on second reading on the House floor. It came out of committee in very good shape. It was a date-based, month-based moratorium that said between June 1st and September 26th, you can't shut off the electricity or the gas service at a low-income household. That was amended on the floor to speak only to 48 hours in advance of a projected heat index of at least 95 degrees Fahrenheit for those folks that might have a disconnection notice. You can't shut them off. That's not quite as strong as we would like it. It's not anything we're opposed to, don't get me wrong, but we're going to be speaking to the need to change that back to something that will really improve people's life. And that's a solid, month-based moratorium, very clear, easy to implement, easy to manage, easy to understand. Nothing left up to the discretion of weather forecasts and what weather app you're looking at to get that forecast. So a little difficult to implement, but we're very, very thrilled that it's still in there. And then the third item that we really like in the bill is finally there's a requirement in law that utilities report consumer information, if you will, the amount of customers in arrears Who's over 60 days? Who's over 90 days? How many? How many disconnection notices have you sent? How many disconnections did you actually, implement last month? Those sort of information. Why is that important? Because we all talk about affordability. Everybody talks about affordability in their own way, but how do we know if Hoosiers can afford their utility bills if we don't have the data to inform us of can they actually inform their utility bills? When we do look at the data, what do we see? 1 in 4 customers in utilities are in arrears. 1 in 2 customers for certain utilities are receiving disconnect notices on a monthly basis. Information like that screams affordability crisis, but we need to have that data over the course of a period of time. So we have information over time so we can see trends and cycles and where we might need to step in and make sure that we make adjustments so utilities are affordable. So very important provisions, those first 3, the low income programs, the summer disconnect moratorium, and the reporting of data. Those are very, very important issues that CAC is in strong support of. The one thing we don't like a whole lot is the last bullet there, and that's the mandate that all customers get moved to what's currently being called budget billing. The bill requires that it be called levelized billing and not budget billing. We're not crazy about a mandate on forcing people onto budget billing or levelized billing, if you will. There is an opt-out, so customers will be able to opt out at any time with no penalty. So that's a good thing. So while it does mandate the utility put you on levelized billing by July 1st of 2026, unless you opt out, but it's not a very popular provision. There was an amendment proposed to remove it. Amendment wasn't offered. And I know there's some pushback about that provision, and we're certainly not in favor of forcing people onto budget billing. It's been available for decades. If you want to go on budget billing, great. But a lot of people have issues with budget billing, especially utilities that sort of play games with reconciliation mechanisms and balances and other things. So let's get that out of the bill. That has nothing to do with affordability and really should come out of the bill. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Ben, to talk about the rate making provisions and the performance-based rate making in the bill.
Well, thank you, Kerwin, and good evening, Hoosiers. And just a friendly reminder, as you come up with questions throughout our webinar, please feel free to enter that into the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of our webinar presentation tonight. So I'll be talking a little bit more about HB 1002 and some of the performance-based rate making and other provisions. So let's start with multi-year rate plans. To help understand what a multi-year rate plan is, I think it's helpful to understand what our current status quo is. And that is utilities are able to file rate cases at the time of their choosing. They have a lot of discretion on when they file the rate cases. Then they can go quite a few years in between rate cases. When they do file a rate case to change our base rates, they typically will be looking ahead and changing them one time, maybe 2 times through a 2-step implementation, so that you might get a rate increase right away once a commission approves the rate case, and then a second rate increase in the following year. What a multi-year rate plan will do under this law is set a 3-year rate case schedule. So it will require each utility to file in a specific cadence every 3 years, and they're staggered across our different utilities, so they're not all happening all at once. What these are going to be doing are looking out over 3 successive years and setting rates for those years at the same time. So one of the practical concerns we have about this type of a plan is that it could be leading our utilities to, instead of having sporadic rate increases, just rate increases every single year that are just smaller in size. Because they're going to be happening every single year, year after year, under this type of potential program. So this is not necessarily a dramatic change, because we already have what are essentially 2-year plans that are filed through utility rate cases today. We do have some concerns about this provision nonetheless. Regarding performance incentive mechanisms, this is another topic that falls under the bucket of performance-based rate making. And I want to be clear that this is a very incremental proposal in this legislation. We're not fundamentally altering our utility business model or that structure in the state of Indiana under this potential legislation here. What it would do is make some very small adjustments to the utility's profit margin or return on equity based on the utility's reporting on 2 different metrics. And those metrics relate to their service restoration times after storms in relating to the number of how long customers are being disconnected for. Or, pardon me. Yeah, when a customer experiences a service interruption, how long is that interruption for on average? And looking to see if that utility is improving over time. And if they're improving over time, they can get a slight bump to their profit margin. If they're getting worse over time, they can get a small decrease to that return on equity. And so that would be the first performance incentive mechanism. The second performance incentive mechanism is an affordability-based one. We do see some challenges with the current way that that is proposed. It would allow utilities to essentially increase their rates if their rates had been increasing at a rate that is lower than the national average. So there's some challenges there with respect to those specific performance incentive mechanisms. But overall, I would stress that these are relatively minor in their impact to consumers as currently drafted in this legislation. So we'll be sure to keep a close eye on that to make sure this is not fundamentally altering that business model and particularly in a way that would be detrimental to consumers. Now, with these changes to multi-year rate plans, it does bring up the issue of why do our utilities continue to have bill trackers, or in other words, surcharges that they can charge outside of a rate case to collect specific types of costs that fall into specific buckets. Trackers were claimed by utilities to be important so that they could recover specific costs in a timely manner. But with a multi-year rate plan and utilities having to file on a 3-year schedule, it really kind of removes the need to have all of these bill trackers. And so we certainly see the need for additional consideration of potentially curtailing the use of some of those bill trackers that have helped drive rates higher in the state of Indiana. Finally, one other issue in this bill relates to the fact that it is amending a provision that currently allows the governor to declare a disaster emergency or state of emergency. And the amendments would allow the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission to make this recommendation to the governor to declare such a disaster emergency or state of emergency under specific conditions. Those specific conditions, there are 3 of them that would allow for this type of declaration. The first is a national economic depression. The second is an act of war. And the third is a disaster of unprecedented size and destructiveness. So those are fairly specific circumstances that are relatively unlikely to occur. But certainly having this language can raise some concerns. Whenever there's the potential for the declaration of an emergency, you want to make sure that it's an actual emergency because the powers it gives to the commission, if there is an emergency declared, are very considerable. They can suspend the current rates. They can make some very significant changes to the service and how utilities operate and their practices. So we do want to make sure that those provisions are well thought out. So with that, let me pass it over back to Lindsay to talk about some of the bad legislation. Lindsay, take it away.
Thanks, Ben. A very detailed markup of 1002. So I'm going to speak about a less good bill. In fact, a really terrible bill that just passed the Senate today, actually, Senate Bill 277. So if you are paying attention to the State House, this will not be news for you. This is probably one of the largest environmental deregulation bills that I've ever seen in my 20 years at the State House. It passed today, the Senate 2919. It's authored by Senator Rick Niemeyer, who is the chair of the Senate Environment Committee, and it eliminates more than 250 environmental mandates and deregulates the environment in the name of efficiency. So in our testimony, we stated that this is deregulation simply for saying deregulation. And obviously, we're tremendously concerned for this bill because of not only its depth and broad approach with a very wide swath of changes, but it just doesn't smack to us. Like, it has been really thought through with the detail from the environmental viewpoints rather than those who are asking for this bill. And you obviously always have to follow the money when you look at legislation. This is being asked for by Indiana's special interests. So a large number of special interests working on this bill testified in support of it. And we obviously testified in opposition to the bill. Of most concern for us is the elimination of any item oversight relating to radioactive, hazardous, and toxic waste. This is a huge issue for us, clearly. It has been since day one. Senate Bill 277 also removes the authority of the item commissioner to call a public hearing to discuss the risks to public health and safety that come from nuclear reactors. The state simply has absolutely no experience in governing nuclear reactors. And so it begs the question, why are we doing this? Why are we moving forward on this? We are already, in some rankings, the worst for air and water quality in the nation, like the worst, 50 out of 50. And so why do we need to make it even worse? And don't ask the question at the State House if it can get worse, because it will. So our testimony also on Senate Bill 258, which is similar language to 277, regarding the nuclear component of the bill in 277, that also exists in Senate Bill 258 as well, which was just scheduled for a hearing this coming week. So our testimony on both bills spoke to the fact that the state of Indiana has zero experience when it comes to operating a commercial scale nuclear reactor. And that bill also, 258, also passed the Senate last Thursday by a vote of 36-9. I will slap it back over to Kerwin for House Bill 1368, which is Representative Soliday's answer to our, well, take it away, Kerwin.
Yeah, House Bill 1368, just simply titled Carbon, is a bill that we opposed when it was heard in committee a few weeks back. What the bill, though, the meat of the bill is what the bill does is it requires that the Indiana Department of Natural Resources file at the EPA for what is called primacy for the issuance of Class 6 permits. Class 6 permits are a specific permit created during the Obama administration that is specific to storing or sequestering CO2 captured from industrial sites. It's a Class 6 permit specific to CCS. Currently, those Class 6 permits are issued by the Environmental Protection Agency, by the EPA, the federal government, although there are a handful of states that already have primacy or are seeking primacy over those Class 6, which means the state of Indiana, via the Department of Natural Resources, would be the entity or the agency responsible for issuing those Class 6 permits. We have some concerns. Indiana's track record on environmental permitting is not actually, not stellar, if you will. A lot of the rankings, we are at the top or the bottom, depending on where the bad category is, if you will. And so we don't have much confidence in the state of Indiana necessarily in looking out to protect the interests of communities over the interests of special interests. But another significant concern of House Bill 1368 is, the only permits issued by the EPA for Class 6 wells in Indiana are the 2 permits issued to Wabash Valley Resources, which I mentioned earlier, project out in West Terre Haute that planning to inject CO2 in both Vigo County and Vermilion County. What the bill says is it directs DNR to file for primacy when should Indiana get primacy, directs the Natural Resource Commission to update new rules and requirements for CCS projects being done in the state of Indiana. However, it exempts Wabash Valley Resources, the project in West Terre Haute, from any new requirements that the Natural Resources Commission may come up with, that if they do come up with, they're coming up with because it's in the best interest of protecting the state of Indiana. Yet for some reason, that one project continues to receive all of these exemptions. Different set of rules for everybody else other than Wabash Valley Resources. And we just, as we said in committee, and we've said over the years, we just fail to understand, number one, what makes that project any different than any other CCS project, and why exactly, what makes Vigo County and Vermilion County any different than any other community or any other county in the state of Indiana. It's patently unfair. to that community, to those citizens. It's also unfair. We're supposed to have a level playing field for everybody when it comes to doing business in the state of Indiana, and why we have one set of rules for everybody else and a different set of rules for only one entity. It's just not fair. And again, we do have concerns. You're talking about geological sequestration of supercritical CO2, which poses risks not only geologically with respect to potentially earthquake and seismic activity, but we also know about the threat that supercritical CO2 stored underground poses to our water supplies, our underground reservoirs, and also the risks of supercritical CO2 migrating to the surface, and asphyxiation, of course, because CO2 is heavier than oxygen, displaces oxygen, and can cause health problems. So this is serious business that requires technical and engineering expertise to review at a time when Indiana is cutting back regulations, trying to streamline government, cutting agency budgets and such. We don't think it's a real good idea necessarily to move that to the state of Indiana with our current resources, if you will. But we'll be paying attention to that process, and that bill as it moves forward did receive 36 no votes on the House floor. So we'll see what happens in the Senate. But again, yeah, we're not in support at the moment of House Bill 1368. Oh, and this is Ben. Ben is going to talk to us about House Bill 1333, aka the preemption bill, if you will. So take it away, Ben.
That's right. The last bill we'll be talking about tonight is House Bill 1333. This bill is authored by Representative Culp, and it did pass the House Utilities, Energy, and Telecommunications Committee 8-4, then passed Ways and Means by a vote of 14-6. Later on, it was actually a proposed amendment on the bill was voted down today, actually, just a few hours ago. And the legislation has not yet passed the House, but will be up for a vote on Monday. So this legislation is still one of the last pieces of legislation here to be considered by the House and potentially move forward. But we do have some significant concerns about this piece of legislation for several reasons. First and foremost, I would say, is the issue of local control and how it would take away control from local communities. Specifically, this bill would remove local control over development, any and all type of development, on lower quality agricultural land. Specifically, it would designate any and all development as a permitted use if it is on land comprised of soil classes of 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. So this would be the agricultural land that is not the prime agricultural farmland, but it would take away the local unit of government's ability to say what types of development would be reasonable or unreasonable for that parcel of land. So obviously that has some significant concerns if communities don't have the ability to say no to types of development that don't fit that area. For example, data centers are an obvious concern of ours, but also other types of development, anything from like a nuclear power plant to a dump to any other types of development you can imagine that you might want to think carefully about where it's sited. This would take away that ability for local communities to have that ability. It's not only about that, unfortunately. There's some other provisions as well. One of the good parts of the bill, I would say, at least it's better than the status quo, is currently in the state of Indiana, data centers of a large size get a full sales tax exemption for a period of up to 50 years, meaning these large new data centers that we're seeing proposed across the state don't have to pay any sales tax at all. What this bill would do would allow the data centers to keep that sales tax exemption, but 1% of the benefit of that sales tax exemption they would have to give or remit to the local unit of government to help fund the local unit of government's services, if you will. So that would mean the data center would still get to keep 99% of that benefit. So we still have a lot of concerns about why we're subsidizing these extremely energy intensive businesses to come to our state and put a lot of strain on our grid, create a lot of concern about the affordability of our rates, and create a lot of local and environmental concerns related to those facilities. Um, and then some of the other provisions of the bill relate to things like public hearings in before, for example, the Board of Zoning Appeals. It would allow or it would actually require folks to actually give their names and addresses if they would like to speak at such a public hearing. And then it would allow the public officer or the presiding officer of such a hearing to prioritize folks who live in a county, who live in that county or who have an interest in that county. So we don't necessarily have a lot of concerns about this. We do think that is a general, or some local governments are already applying this type of standard where they do ask folks to give their names and they are prioritizing folks that live in the county when it comes to public comments. But I did want to mention that was also a component of this bill. So with that, let me pass it back to Kelly to help us learn how we can take action about some of these important pieces of legislation.
So thank you so much, Ben and Kerwin and Lindsay. We covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of work that we're doing down at the State House. And now, of course, it's the audience participation portion of the webinar. It is really important that legislators hear from you because they're hearing a lot from large industries and their lobbyists at the State House. So we work to make it really easy for you to make your voice heard. You can scan these QR codes or click the links that Lindsay is chatting to everybody. And we want you to take action on House Bill 1002. We want legislators to support it and strengthen it because people really need help. We can't afford bills. A lot of folks are struggling, and we need House Bill 1002 to be strong for the people. We also need you to get a hold of your legislators about the Senate Bills 258 and 277 that Lindsay spoke about. Urge them to reject it because that has some bad legislation in there. And if you can, obviously take action right now, but we really appreciate it if you can help us spread the word to your networks. So we'll be sharing these actions on social media. They're already on our website. We'll be getting emails out for you to take action. And if you can, forward the email to some friends or share our post on social media or text the links to your friends, that really does help us get even more people engaged in the work that we're doing. And we will also be priming for the Q&A here in just a minute. So we've had some good questions come in. Feel free to type any others in. We might not get to everybody tonight, but we'll follow up via email if we don't answer them all live. Do want to make a quick plug for our website. We work really hard to have a lot of helpful resources on our website for you so that you can be engaged and informed with the legislative session and other important issues. On our website, we'll have, the recording of this webinar and the slides, as well as more info about the session. You can, of course, sign up to stay in the loop via email and text as well, and chip in with a contribution to support our work because, let me tell you, it takes money to fight money. So everybody pitching in with what they can helps us to keep up the fight. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And we will change this and let's dive in with some questions. I think we'll start up here, Kerwin, with one that'd be a good fit for you. It seems as if perhaps NIPSCO or other utilities are hiking up delivery fees. Are there alternatives? And if so, what are they?
Well, delivery fees are primarily a component of gas, water, and wastewater bills. And yes, we are seeing a disturbing trend that really started, 10 years ago or so by shifting much more of the costs for natural gas and water and wastewater service to a fixed charge versus a volumetric component. The general argument from the industry behind that is those are capital intensive services, if you will. Those pipes cost a lot of money, and they're there irrespective of how much water or how much gas you use. So, whatever. Generally, people pay for service. Ratepayers pay for electricity when their lights come on, gas when they turn their furnace on, and water when they open the faucet. But utilities are shifting more and more of those costs to delivery fees. And those are things that, are addressed at the IURC in proceedings where folks like Citizens Action Coalition, folks like the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, when it comes down to rate cases, other cost recovery proceedings, we of course argue vociferously to reduce the amount of fixed cost, which what a delivery charge really is. And no, there are no alternatives. The only alternative in the state of Indiana is actually in NIPSCO service territory for gas. There is a NIPSCO choice program where you can choose an alternative supplier for your gas. However, don't be deceived because you're still going to be paying NIPSCO to deliver the gas to you, meaning you're still going to be paying NIPSCO delivery charges. So the answer to your question is there any way around delivery charges? No. Even if you deregulate electricity, if you will still be paying your electricity supplier to deliver the electricity to your home. But this is true even in deregulated states where people do have a choice. You are still paying the incumbent monopoly, if you will, the utility that has that service territory prescribed to them by the state. They are still delivering that product to you, whether that's electricity, water, gas, whatever the case may be. So sadly, no, even deregulating or providing competition would not solve the problem that is jacking up everybody's delivery charges. That's a problem that needs to be addressed in two places. Number one, before the commission, in cases where that's an issue for the commission to consider, and state policy, if you will. Lots of bills are introduced on subject matter such as that. So it's continuing to talk to the folks that have the jurisdiction over those types of issues. And that's just something I'll say quickly. When you have concerns, if you will, frustrations, rage sometimes about the cost of your utilities, make sure that you're directing those frustrations, those concerns to the folks that can actually hold those people accountable. And those are the regulators before the IURC in most cases, but more importantly, those are your state representatives, your state senators at the state house who set state policy. Make sure you direct frustrations to the folks that actually can make a change.
Thank you, Kerwin. I'm going to put you in the hot seat again about House Bill 1002 this time regarding trackers, Kerwin.
Yes, our friend trackers, yes.
Yes, our good friend trackers. Is the concern that existing trackers will still exist and be used in conjunction with the multi-year rate plan?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. That's one of the concerns. Yes. But the other concern, which Ben was speaking to, is why do we need them anymore? The idea of a multi-year rate plan, what's behind a multi-year rate plan is utilities will file these multi-year rate plans using future years, projecting their costs in year one, year two, year three. The idea of trackers was to allow utilities to recover costs sort of in between rate cases. So they wouldn't have to jack up rates necessarily, but they could increase costs to recover for the power plant they're building or the transmission projects they're doing or whatever the case may be. So why do we need trackers anymore if they're going to be filing every 3 years these multi-year rate plans using future test years, using forecasted costs? Well, they know what projects they're doing. They know where their capital spend is going to go 3 years out. So from our perspective, if we're going to mandate 3-year multi-year rate plans, well, let's get rid of these trackers. Why do they need them? So yes, it is absolutely a concern that we will have these multi-year rate plans with 3-year established base rates, if you will, and then on top of that, ongoing tracker proceedings that will just pancake costs right on top of these multi-year rate plans. So if our interest is not only bringing stability and predictability to monthly utility bills, but also achieving affordability, then let's get that done. Let's not allow these utilities. Let's not kid ourselves. Monopoly utilities have one primary interest and one primary interest only, and that is their fiduciary responsibility to deliver earnings and dividends to their shareholders, maximize profits, if you will. How do they maximize profits? They spend money. The more money they spend, the more money they make. So let's rein these guys in. Multi-year rate plans, sure, great idea, but let's get rid of all the tick-and-tack stuff they can do in between that exacerbate utility bill concerns. Let's rein these folks in. We want to hold these folks accountable, make things more affordable and livable in Indiana, and let's get rid of the majority of the trackers they need, especially understanding that these 3-year rate plans are designed for that very purpose, to predict what bills are going to look like. And if you still have trackers going on, then how can folks really predict what's going to be coming out of their pocket in month 3, month 4, month 5, et cetera, and so on. So yeah, trackers need to go.
Well said. I think we continue on the tracker train, Kerwin, because we got a really good follow-up, with all this affordability discussion happening at the State House. Is there any discussion to get rid of existing trackers?
Well, that's part of our action. We're gonna, there is conversation going on about trackers, which is a very good thing, and that's in part why we're, remain supportive of 1002, because the conversation is going in the right direction. Finally, we're talking about bills and affordability and those type of things. So we're going to continue to talk about trackers with legislators, and hopefully, we can make even more progress on that front, because there is some language that was added to the bill on amendment and second reading that did strengthen some of the language around trackers in terms of making the utilities consider, what they're going to be doing sort of moving forward. So at least there's a spotlight on that issue now. Legislators are aware of the issue, and they're understanding and hearing those concerns. So again, optimistic that this conversation is occurring and going in the right direction, and we got to keep pushing, and we got to keep raising the issue. And let's get a better outcome when all is said and done, and the bill gets signed by the governor.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kerwin. Okay, we've got a question about whether the DNR Resource Commission is eliminated and how that would affect House Bill 1368. And it does seem, Kerwin, that you...
Oh, I was like, I should probably just type an answer, and my answer would have been, that's a very good question. So I don't know, but that's a very good question. If on the one hand, they want to eliminate the Natural Resources Commission, but then this is where maybe talking out of both sides of their mouths, if you will. So I don't know the answer to that question.
So I might
eliminate the natural. What's that?
I might weigh in really quickly, if I might, because
yeah, go right ahead.
This expressly is spoken to in House Bill 1003, which is a really large bill. I am not in any way, shape, or form going to try to even summarize right now, but it is a pretty hefty bill that, again, is featured as a quote reform bill to eliminate a large number of boards and commissions that many say are unhelpful for the state of Indiana. Obviously, I, with you, would disagree that this elimination of the DNR, a Natural Resources Commission, I don't believe that should be included at all. There was effort in the House today. This bill was amended there. I cannot speak for sure to know that the Natural Resources Commission was indeed placed back in to statute, but I do believe this was discussed on the House floor today. So pay attention to, there are a number of entities following 1003 carefully, including, just many conservation nonprofits working on this. So make sure you keep up to date with like Backcountry Hunters and others that are following this. But I would agree. I don't believe that the elimination of that would be in any way, shape, or form helpful.
Yeah, but quickly, if I may, Kelly, I'll just say this conversation really shines a spotlight on why these very fast, short sessions can be very problematic, because frequently the left hand doesn't have time to keep up with the right hand, let alone what they're doing. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in, Kelly.
Jam-packed, absolutely. Ben, you're up. House Bill 1333. If the ground is not considered prime farmland, basically the local government will not be able to turn down rezoning for industrial use for things like data centers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, let me clarify, because I think I was slightly inaccurate when I was describing it earlier, maybe not fully describing it. So first of all, it only applies to land that is zoned agricultural. And so for that land that is already zoned agricultural, for soil types 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I believe, for those specific soil types, any development is deemed a permitted use in that situation. So my understanding of that would mean, yes, the local unit of government would not have the ability to say no to a data center on that type of land or say no to another type of development. Development is very, I don't believe it's defined in the legislation. It's a very broad term. So we obviously have a lot of concerns about that opening the door to anything and everything.
Thank you, Ben. Anybody want to chip in with that? Or shall we move on? Okay. Let's see here. Kerwin, and I think we're winding down, y'all. And if we don't get to all questions, we will follow up via email. But with the current version of House Bill 1002, does it require service to be reconnected if a customer is disconnected before a qualifying weather event?
No. I have reread, and reread the amended version of the bill, and I do not see language that would require a reconnection before that weather event, which was in the introduced version of the bill, which was a very good thing. And no, we do not see language that requires utilities reconnect those customers. In fact, the language specifically applies only to a LIHEAP eligible household that has received a disconnection notice. So that is a very small universe of people. And if you're, my read of the current language is if your power is off and you're a LIHEAP eligible household, I don't see language in the bill that requires that the electric utility turn that power back on. So unfortunately, based on my current read of the bill in its current form, and again, I say current form because there's lots of conversations going around about 1002, and it's already changed dramatically just in the 3 times that the bill has been presented. And I expect further changes, and that's something that obviously CAC will be speaking to because that's problematic.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we are so grateful to everyone for joining us tonight and for being here and for asking such awesome questions. We will be sure to follow up via email to the questions that we did not get to tonight. And also do keep your eyes peeled for emails from us with a link to watch the recording of this webinar and to access the slides. We appreciate you for being here, for taking action and supporting us. We really can't keep up the fight for affordable utility bills, a cleaner environment, and a stronger democracy without all of you and your support. So many thanks. Take good care, stay warm, and keep your eyes peeled to email. Thanks so much.